Hey there everybody, today we're going to be painting this Ork Pain Boy, so after he finishes all of his magic spinning around, let's get straight into it. Right, so the best place to start with orcs I've always found is with the skin. It's so bright, draws so much attention, and it's usually covered in a lot of little doodads. So we're going to start with the base colour of Ork flesh, not being too tidy, because we don't need to be, because we can always come back and cover all the other bits and pieces. Now we're going to go crazy with the lead belcher all over everything that might have any sort of semblance of metal to it. Not forgetting any of these little details, these little teeth that are inexplicably on this pipe as well, and the syringes, and all the little knickknacks on his back. Now on some of these areas we're going to make our own coppery type metallic paint, but we're going to come back and do that later. We just want this lead belcher underneath to make sure we get a nice bright metallic finish first, which we'll then colour with a bit more interest. Onto the pants now, we're going to use Garagax Sewer, nice contrast paint, just to give it a slightly leathery feel. We'll add some texture to this later. Now back to the skin, we're going to go in with a heavy wash of Beeltan Green, just to get into those recesses and start adding a little shape to his flesh. Switching over to his apron now, we're going to go with a nice bright blue with the rust grey. I say blue, it's more of a grey colour because it's called rust grey. And that's going to set us up nicely for some contrast when we start adding some blood effect to this later. Back to the flesh now, and I'm going to be using a dry brush to bring back some of those mid-tones using Ork flesh again. Just want to make sure I get over the higher points of his flesh here, not going into those recesses so that we don't cover up the Beeltan Green that we've put in, and we're going to start bringing him to life. As I go on, I'm going to start adding ever so slightly more Flash Gits Yellow to the mix, and just concentrating on ever decreasing highlight areas and high points and sharp edges to really bring him to life. Bugman's Glow now, I'm going to be using this for the leather straps, and I also paint the handles on his tools here, but I do come back later and realise that these are just it all looks too similar, and for the wood it's just a little too bright and a little too desaturated for me. So here you can see me coming back in with some Rhinox hide, just to redefine those wooden handles on his cutty tools. Magmadroth Flame now. I'm going to be putting this over all the tubing and piping that he has running from his stabby fingers and his pokey gun over to his power pack, injection pack at the back, just to set up a nice deep orange base colour for some highlights we're going to put in there later to make it look a bit more like liquid is flowing through them. I'm giving those pipes a second coat of Magmadroth just to make sure I get a nice deep intense colour, kind of counteracting the point of having a contrast paint, but I am loving the depth of colour this orange paint gives me. Okay, so here I'm taking an equal mix of Corax White and Rust Grey, and I'm going to be going over the areas that I'm going to be painting as glass capsules. So the syringe on his back, the syringes on his fingers, and the two small bottles on his gun. And then I'm going to go with some Magmadroth Flame back over some of the details that I've missed, just those little pipes inside of his crazy Edward Scissorhands style grabby tool. And I'm following up with the Magmadroth Flame on those areas that I want to look like glass, and I'm going to be painting about the bottom half with Magmadroth to start giving a deep base colour to it. But I'm going to be careful to paint it so that it looks as though it's horizontal when the model is standing. Just kind of a little variety, and one of these containers on his pokey gun is going to be in McGrag Blue, just so we've got two different kinds of coloured fluid for him to use. Now back to those metal areas, I'm going to mix equal parts Troll Slayer Orange and Retributor Armour. I love Retributor Armour, it gives great coverage, really intense gold colour, but I want it to be a little more coppery and a little more orange, a little less regal. So mixing these two together gives me a really nice brassy feel for some of the parts to break up the metal areas, just add a little interest. Again, just picking out interesting little parts, brass coverings, brass plates. This cuff on his leg I think really highlights the junction between his trousers and his fake legs, so we draw even more attention to that little metal peg leg. Okay, with some pure Troll Slayer Orange, I'm going to be painting the top half of the bottom half that I painted with Magmadroth Flame in those glass vials, just so that it looks like we're getting a little bit of highlight through that liquid inside of the bottle. Maybe go over the Rust Grey and Corax White area as well, just to give it an extra depth and a little bit more highlight. Now little by little we're going to add a little bit more Flash Gits Yellow to the Troll Slayer Orange, and that way we're going to start working on a highlight at that top area of the liquid. Also using the same mix in the little drops of fluid and also over the top edges of the pipes so they get some highlight, giving them a transparent feel, pulsing with that fluid. Now in the same areas, just in a smaller section, we're going to be using the Flash Gits Yellow to get some nice line highlights on the pipes and on the fluid. We're also going to be just dotting in some little sketchy patches to make it look like we've got some bubbles flowing through that liquid too. I'm going to quickly mix together some Wraithbone and Flash Gits just for the teeth on both our Pain Boy and his little Ork Helper Dude. Please excuse how often I drop this model. Okay, I've got a small piece of sponge and some tweezers here. I've got it on with some corn red. Just dried it off a little on some paper towel so it's not too wet with paint. I'm going to be sort of poking away at his apron and his bandage to give him a nice blood-stained pattern. So it's quite random, not too neat, and more splattery. It looks like he's been really working on his buddies. I'm also going to add that to the edges of his claw blades, and that way it looks like he's been using it. Okay, with some pure Corax White, which I actually fixed because we all know Corax White is a living nightmare. Maybe I'll make a video on how I fix my Corax White. But we're going to add that to some very small areas of these pipes and these syringes just to give them a real nice glassy shine. Straight line, top to bottom on the syringe, and then just a little bit into the recess at the bottom to give it a reflection. Flash Gits Yellow now for the eyes of both our Pain Boy and our little Helper Dude. And a tiny dot here of Battle Red just on his eye lens to break it up a little bit. Okay, one of my favourite shade colours, Berserker Blood Shade. So good. We're going to be putting this into the recesses on his bandage, on his arm. And we're also going to be painting into recesses on his apron. And what this does is it gives the bandage a feel of having soaked up some blood and it's spread through it a little bit, rather than just a clean patch. Looks like it's been on the top, this looks like it's been soaked through. Also going to run this over the metallic areas where we have blood, and just gives the metal that stained with blood over time look. And here, as I said before, just getting into the recesses of his apron, making sure it looks like it's had its fair day of work. Good old Nuln Oil, we are going to absolutely lather all of our metallic areas in it. Mopping up a little bit on the top so we don't get too much coffee staining, but we want it deep in those recesses so it looks like a nice and dirty healing implement. Some tiny touches of Flash Gitz Yellow just on the sharpest parts of the orc flesh, especially the tops of those ears and the ridges of the face. Then we're coming in with a dry brush of Stormhost Silver just on the metal to bring back a little bit of that mid-tone, but also at the same time to add a little highlight and a little variety to those metallic areas, so they've got some shine but still look quite dirty and well used. Again, I'm just making sure I get all the edges of the metallic areas, drawing some highlights, creating some contrast, bringing it to life. Just using a little watered down Wraithbone, and we're just going to put this onto the lips of our Pain Boy, because we're going to add some wash to the recesses around his mouth in a second, and it's going to really make it look a bit more lifelike. Stormhost Silver again, but we're using the brush this time to add some spot highlights to the very tippy top areas of some of the metal and to some of the edges that may have been cleaned off and sharpened. Back to the lips, Berserker Bloodshade, and we're putting a very thin line just into the opening of his mouth. I say an opening, just the area between his lips. It's super subtle, but this little touch of red against the deep greens and yellows all over his flesh really creates a very subtle bit of contrast, but also makes him feel like there's life in that face. I'm using a little watered down Dark Reaper here just to add some highlights to his boots, or his one boot, sorry, because he's got a peg leg, and the back of it as well. Using some Steel Legion Drab, I'm going to quickly add some life to this rather flat area of leather by quickly applying a dab and then using a cotton bud, or a Q-tip if you're American, to spread it around and soak up some of it, giving a bit of leather texture and highlight without going too overboard, and just taking away some of that flatness. Quick and effective rust effect here, very watered down Doombull Brown into the recesses of his metal peg leg, so it looks like he's been walking through all sorts of battle areas covered in rust. A light cover of PVA glue for the base. It's going to save us painting this, and then we're going to cover that in sand, nice and even, shake off the excess, and I've been quite lucky. The edge is relatively clean, so just using a cotton bud to clean off any of the dust from the sand gives us a nice clean edge. Adding a couple of stick-on grass shrubs just to bring some life to that base, and he's looking pretty good at the moment. I realised I missed this small dark area on his healing fist, so I'm going to draw in some checker patterns with a pencil. Just being careful to keep those vertical lines nice and vertical, the horizontal lines nice and vertical, but they don't need to be perfectly straight. And then some Administratum Grey just to paint in those checkers. Again, doesn't need to be perfect. The ultimate excuse, Orcs painted it. Now we're busting out the metal marker, little signature on the bottom, and he's finished. And there he is in all of his Pain Boy glory with his little helper dude on his back. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we're back soon with another one.